What's up, everybody? I am your host, Daddy Buckner, a member of the zombie redneck torture family, not to be confused with just basic zombies. It's a common misconception. And that is my co-host, Merman, who's a lot cooler than you may think. And welcome to the Grindhouse Syndicate, where today we cover a movie that I absolutely, thoroughly enjoy. A movie that I would say does a really great job at paying homage to the horror genre as a whole, but mostly monster movies and slashers. So today we are talking about Drew Goddard's The Cabin in the Woods from 2012. I can't believe it has already been this long since this movie came out. It's been a while.
Yeah, 2012, that was a long time ago,
Like
man.
13 years ago.
When I say it, it feels like it was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But, been quite some time.
Yeah, if you were to ask me, like, how long this has been out, I would just guess off the top of my head. I'd say, I don't know, like 8 years. But yeah, it's been like 13.
Yeah, this movie, was a really interesting one for me. I didn't watch this movie until maybe a year or 2 ago, and here's why. So, whenever I heard Cabin in the Woods for the first time, my first thought was Evil Dead. I'm like, all right, we're going to get an awesome, like, Evil Dead type horror. We're going to get, like, The Strangers, where there's going to be, like, some killers come after some people in a cabin in the fucking woods. And then I heard the synopsis for it, and I found out that it was, like, these scientists underground with all these different monsters, and they were releasing them. And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't want any part of that." Like, that sounds like sci-fi, like, in a complete different direction. I'm thinking of, like, scientists in lab coats, like some Resident Evil type
Yeah,
shit underground, and I refused to watch it for a long, long, long time.
Wow.
And when I did, I was very impressed with it because I had such low standards. One of the benefits of going into a movie with the lowest of standards is you can't be disappointed.
True.
I absolutely fucking loved the first half of this movie.
So I remember when I seen it, and it was as soon as it came out on DVD. And a friend of ours, Logan, actually brought it over to watch. And I didn't know anything about it. I went into it completely blind. So as we're watching it, I remember thinking, like, what in the fuck is going on here? And I mean, I'm like halfway through the movie and I'm still like, what is fucking happening? So I got the joy of, like, for one, being totally surprised, had no idea what it was. And two, because I'm pretty sure he rented it from like Redbox. And two, just like getting to try to solve what was happening as the movie was playing out, which is one of the really cool things about the first time you watch it, is you're really trying to piece together what's going on. And you can tell that it's a movie that's really based off of like horror tropes. So, you have the knowledge to figure out what's going on, and you're just really trying to put everything together. But, by the time I got to the end, I was like, I would have never guessed that. That was out of nowhere.
Yeah, when I finally did watch it, even having the little bit of knowledge that I heard, which was that these things were actually like scientists underground, I was still very much like, okay, what's going on here? I was super stoked when the zombies come out of the ground, and I'm like, oh my God, they're real zombies, because I had it in my head that everything was going to be like generic, like faked, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
created in a lab. And so I still had that that very much going into it and trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. Although I knew that they were kind of being watched, I had no idea how everything unfolded. And I ended up, I like for there to be an actual, like, scary supernatural aspect of it, not that it's all like made up by scientists and shit. But this movie does have that. These are like real creatures. There's just they kind of have to run through the scenario for a certain reason, and which is also a supernatural reason they have to do it. So yeah, I was very happy and impressed when I watched it for the first time. I only watched it because I kept hearing it referenced all the time in different things, like different shows talking about horror. Seen it on a ton of like top horror movie lists
Yeah.
and stuff. So finally I was like, okay, like I've heard a ton of people, like Eli Roth mentions it in his show, like the 100 Greatest Horror. There was another one similar to that on Shudder that it's mentioned in. I've seen it mentioned in documentaries and all these very respected people in horror praising this movie. So finally I was like, okay, well, these people, these people are legends in horror. So if they like it, it can't be as bad as what I have in my head.
Now, if you haven't seen this, definitely go and watch it. It is a fantastic horror film. It's funny as hell. Everybody who's in it's great. And after my research, I now have an even bigger respect for this film. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag quite yet, but I found out some really interesting things about this that I can't wait to share. So, with that being said, are you ready to dive into the cabin in the woods?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
Hello, boys and ghouls. If you want to stay up to date on what's going on with the show, talk about or submit your movie requests, or just say die, then I got good news for you. You can always find us at one of our social media accounts or our official website at Grindhouse.Horror.Pod.com, Facecrook at the Grindhouse Syndicate Horror Podcast, Instascam at grindhousesyndicate.horror.pod, and many gore, which you can always find links for in the show notes as always. And you know what I always say, the morgue, the merrier. So please subscribe or follow for alerts on new episodes. Now, back to the show, kiddies. Frights, camera, action.
And if you really love us and don't want us to read the Latin, give us a review. The Cabin in the Woods is a 2011 science fiction comedy horror film directed by Drew Goddard in his directorial debut, produced by Josh Whedon, and written by both Whedon and Goddard. It stars Kristen Conley, Chris Hemsworth, Anna Hutchinson, Fran Kranz, Jesse Williams, Richard Jenkins, and Bradley Whitford. The plot follows a group of college students who retreat to a remote cabin in the woods where they fall victim to a variety of monsters while technicians manipulate events from an underground facility for a global purpose. So, Goddard and Whedon, who previously worked together on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, wrote the screenplay in just 3 days, describing it as an attempt to revitalize the slasher film genre. And if you don't know, this movie has some connections to the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We even have some actors that were from like the Buffyverse. It's also very similar to season 4 of that show. I believe there are a lot of monsters from the show like in the movie. If there's a lot of overlap here. And if you're a fan of one, then you're most likely a fan of the other because they are very much hand in hand. So, the special effects, monster costumes, makeup, and prosthetics for the film were done by AFX Studio, which should sound very familiar because that is the David Anderson and his amazing wife, Heather Langenkamp. And I cannot wait to talk about these special effects close to the end of the movie because it's wild. So, filming took place in Vancouver, British Columbia from March to May of 2009 on a budget of $30 million, which it doubled because it had a box office of $70 million. Considering the sheer number of creatures to be designed and made for the film, AFX Studios' David Anderson estimated that close to 1,000 people were turned into one of around 60 different monster types. The task required renting a much larger facility to use as a workspace, as a crew of around 60 of the best people available were recruited to work on the monsters. The film was originally slated for release on October 23rd of 2009, which was later delayed to February 5th of 2010 by MGM Studios, but was indefinitely shelved due to financial difficulties. Thankfully, though, in 2011, Lionsgate picked up the distribution rights and the film had a surprise premiere on December of 2011 at the Butt Numathon Film Festival in Austin, Texas, where it attracted highly positive reaction. So this
Thought that was a gay festival.
so we actually talked about that festival on some episode last year, and I remember I think we talked about it. We're like, who the fuck named their festival that? Yeah, but yeah, that's where it debuted and got positive reactions. And then it was released in the United States on April 13th of 2012 to critical and commercial success. It grossed $66.5 million worldwide and received general positive reviews from critics who praised its screenplay, tone, and performances. The Cabin in the Woods was released on DVD and Blu-ray in North America on September 18th of 2012. Both the DVD and Blu-ray feature an audio commentary by Goddard and Wheaton, several featurettes, a documentary about the making of the film, and a Q&A session at the 2012 WonderCon convention. All right, so ratings. These are kind of a little bit all over the place here. Rotten Tom, 92%.
You know, it's funny because when they make an actual horror movie just like this, without the comedy and the scientists and stuff, they give it like a 2%.
IMDb, a 7 out of 10. Letterboxd, 3.4 out of 5. And the Google average audience rating is a 3.2 out of 5. If you would like to watch this movie, you can currently find it streaming on Amazon Prime or for rent on Apple TV, YouTube, Google Play, and Fandango at home for $3.99. All right, are you ready to talk about the plot of this movie?
Yeah,
All right.
I am. After years of putting this off because of the plot, I'm ready to get into the plot.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because this was a movie that I actually wanted to cover last year. And I just never did it because I knew when I wrote it, the plot is difficult to write out because there's so much stuff going on. You actually have kind of two sets of main characters in two different locations. And I was like, I was just dreading writing it out. And then I wrote it this week and I was like, yeah, I mean, it took me like an extra day of writing to get it done. So, but here we are. We've made it. All right, so we start out with this cool little intro where we see these big drops of blood with images inside. And some are like hieroglyphics and others are like these old drawings of sacrifices. Just basically a lot of humans sacrificing people to the gods. We then suddenly cut to a very bland office break room where we see two of our main characters getting a cup of coffee, and these two are Steve Hadley and Gary Sitterson. And they are dressed like casual office workers. They're wearing like dark slacks, a tucked in white collared shirt, and ties. And while they're getting their coffee, Hadley is complaining about his wife baby-proofing their whole house despite the fact that she isn't even pregnant yet. Now, as many times I've watched this movie, I've never really paid attention to what they're talking about. And I was like, I had to rewind it. I was like, did he just mention that she's not even pregnant?
Yeah, it went right over my head.
Oh, you didn't even catch it?
No, I heard them talking about baby proof, but
Yeah,
I didn't.
she's not pregnant.
So
They don't have a kid.
the first time I watched this, I was like, here we go. This is exactly why I didn't wanna watch this. Because I was you hear cabin in the woods, you're thinking of a good cabin horror, and then it starts out with scientists. And I'm like, "Son of a bitch."
I wouldn't say they're scientists.
They're scientists.
They don't do anything science.
They have science departments and stuff.
That's where the scientists work.
Okay, but they're over top of everybody. They're like the management of all of the science
Yeah.
departments. They're science managers.
Science managers.
But it was all uphill from here.
Okay.
So.
So they then leave the break room, and while walking through this large hallway full of other workers, a young female coworker named Wendy quickly walks up behind them and says with a very worried tone that Stockholm went south. Hadley and Sitterson are surprised about this, but not too concerned. When Wendy then says frantically that it is now just Japan and us. Sitterson kind of laughs this off while Hadley explains that there is nothing to worry about and it is not the first time. Plus, Japan has a perfect record and the US always places second. So Wendy here, she's kind of freaking out about this situation, saying that if Japan fails and we fail, it's the perfect situation for a very bad scenario. Sitterson and Hadley then step onto a golf cart and head to their office while telling Wendy that there is nothing to be worried about as they drive away. So right now, we have no idea what they're talking about, but we can tell that they work for like some kind of really big organization, possibly the government, and this is something that the whole world is participating in. So while driving down this big concrete tunnel, Hadley starts to ask Sitterson if he wants to come over and help him work on his kitchen when we suddenly get in big red text across the whole screen, "The Cabin in the Woods," which
with no cabin so far.
No cabin so far.
Just been the scientists in the ground.
In the concrete, it's like this whole building's like just concrete and just concrete tunnels.
Yeah. That's what the movie should have been called. Scientist in the concrete tunnel / ground.
I like this intro though, because I was too expecting like an Evil Dead, like cabin immediately. And it immediately throws you off. Like this whole beginning throws you off. And the reason that it's like that is because Josh Whedon was trying to trick people into thinking that when they came and sat down in the movie that they would think that they actually sat down in the wrong theater. Don't know why he wanted to do that. Don't really get that, but that's kind of why it's so different.
Well, it is very much different than a cabin in the woods. That is for sure. Luckily, I already knew that part of it going in. So I did enjoy the beginning because I was trying to piece together what the fuck is going on here. I knew that it was some like government or organization, but when they started talking about like Stockholm falling and Japan and the US being the only ones left, I was at this point in the movie when you're watching it for the first time, you're like, okay, what the fuck is going on here?
So next, we then hop on over to this little neighborhood in this college town where we see a lot of the students live, where we then meet the rest of our main characters. First, we have Dana, your typical quiet, sweet, good girl, aka like the final girl. Then we have Jules, a very attractive, fun-loving best friend, but she's not playing the, kind of dumb blonde like a lot of the best friend characters do. She's actually very smart and is going to school to be a doctor. Also, another important note, she's actually not really blonde. She naturally has dark brown hair, but she just dyed it the night before this trip, which becomes a little important later on. So next we have Jules' boyfriend, Kurt, and he is a very smart and educated athletic guy who is also very responsible. He has a full academic scholarship as a sociology major, and he also seems to kind of really be in love with his girlfriend, Jules. We then meet Holden, who is a friend of Kurt's, who he invited on this weekend trip, and he's also a very intelligent overachiever, much like Kurt. But this will be his first time meeting most of the group, as Kurt and Jules only invited him, hoping that he and Dana will hit it off. And last but not least, we have the stoner Marty. And Marty is not the typical stoner character. He's more like if Shaggy was less into like raiding the kitchen to make super tall sandwiches and more interested in like theology and current events that affect the world.
Yeah, I thought seeing this for the first time, I remember thinking like Shaggy ditched the Scooby Gang to hang out with like two frat bros and sorority girls. Seems like a weird switch off.
Yeah.
But I will say, despite on the surface level, this not really seeming like a real group of friends, they actually do a really good job. Like this guy's chemistry with them's really good.
Yeah. So, as we can see here, this is not your typical slasher victim group here, and that is on purpose. And you will see why later. So, Dana and Jules are packing for this trip when Kurt comes in and tells them to grab their shit because it is time to go. They then head down and start packing their things into Kurt's RV, where they plan to drive to Kurt's cousin's cabin by the lake to spend the weekend. And this is where Marty rolls up in his car smoking a very large bong. As he gets out, he starts grabbing his things to put into the RV, which I just want to point out, he packed all his shit for the whole weekend in a big ass paper bag.
This guy in real life would do that.
Just everyone else got suitcases and shit. He literally has just a paper bag.
Like we have known some hippie dudes that would totally do this.
Yeah.
Like we don't need to shower for the next month, even if it's a month-long trip. It's paper bag.
Paper bag.
It might be like one of those bigger like Food Lion paper bags, but
yeah, it's not like, pack your lunch in paper bag, but it's still a fucking paper bag. So Kurt tells him that he's not allowed to bring his big ass bong on this trip. When Marty then says, well, no problem. And he literally folds it down into a very believable coffee mug, which, by the way, this was a real functioning prop that cost a whopping $5,000 to design and make.
wow. When I seen this, I was like, I was still up to date with the marijuana usage products in 2012. I was in high school, and I don't remember this. Like, I remember the cool stuff, like the paint can.
Well, it didn't exist outside this movie.
Soda cans. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was like, damn, man, I wish I'd have known about this.
Yeah, it was a real working prop. You could totally put stuff in it, you could smoke out of it, whatever, but it was like $5,000.
Do you think somewhere somebody has this
and
occasionally smokes out of it?
I don't know if they smoke out of it. Somebody has this for sure. So now that everyone has arrived, they all pile into Kurt's RV and head off in search for the cabin in the woods. And as they drive off down the street, the camera pans up to reveal a man on the roof watching them. And as he radios back to headquarters that the nest is empty and they are right on time.
I love this scene because they do such a good job in the beginning of this movie that for a brief second, you forget about the whole scientist and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So when he radios in, it's a reminder like, oh, they're being watched even this early on. This whole thing, this whole plan has been premeditated.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I was almost dreading to write it because you really have two sets of characters, two settings, and they eventually blend together, but at first they're very separate. So later on in this trip, we see Jules make a remark that the road that they are on isn't even on the GPS, which kind of causes Marty to go into a rant about society needing to crumble and that we're all too chicken shit to let it, which this is going to come back later. Then we quickly jump back on over to Hadley and Sitterson, who are standing in front of this huge steel locked door. And when this door opens, we see a security guard whose name is Truman. and Truman is a new transfer. After a brief conversation with Hadley, he assures them that no matter what happens, he will hold his post. And we then see Hadley and Sitterson take their seats at this huge command center with multiple large screens, and on one of these screens, we see a satellite shot of Kurt's RV traveling down a dirt road.
It's kind of interesting. This is completely has nothing to do with the plot, but my first thought was, why would you take a RV to go stay at a cabin in the woods? Like,
Well-
generally, people take RVs to go to the woods to stay in the RV.
It's probably just for the comfort of the trip. I mean, it might be like 5 hours away.
And yeah, I guess.
So next up, we see Kurt and the gang stop at this old rundown gas station where, despite it looking abandoned, Kurt begins pumping gas while the rest of the crew explore. This place has a very Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe to me going on.
Very much.
And another really interesting thing is, so this was supposed to be the first thing they shot. And when they went there to shoot it, it was completely covered in snow. Like, it was a blizzard. Like, it's in the behind the scenes stuff where they literally are out there, like, looking at this place, the whole crew and everything, and it's just blizzard. Whole place is covered in snow. And then this shot here, which you actually see in the movie, is only 1 week later. Yeah, they had to actually go back a week later, and the snow had finally melted, but it was still really cold.
Like South Carolina weather.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
one day it's fucking
up
super
in-
cold, and the
up-
next day it's 80.
up in Canada. So, yeah, it apparently was really cold when they filmed this. Though.
Yeah, they did a really good job if it was that cold, because this totally gives off like Oklahoma / Texas, middle of nowhere, shitty rundown gas station that has been closed for 20 years.
So just when it seems like nobody is working here, a dirty, angry old man pops out of the building telling everyone that the sign says closed.
And he's got a point. I don't know what it is with people in horror movies walking up in buildings that have closed signs on them, but you probably shouldn't
happens.
do that.
It happens a lot.
If you walk into an old rundown building that has a closed sign on it, you are going to die in a horror movie.
It's a given.
It's a given, unless you're a virgin.
Yep.
You might live.
So this is our harbinger, Mordecai, because you have to have the harbinger. And if you don't know what a harbinger is, he is basically our crazy Ralph from Friday the 13th. The whole, like, you don't want to go there, you're going to die. He's that guy.
You're all doomed.
You're all doomed.
Look at the shirt.
Yep, you're all doomed.
It's the Black Craft. You're all doomed.
Nice.
Friday the 13th shirt.
So, yes, he is the harbinger. So Kurt then asks the man about a Tillerman Road, to which he tells them that it leads them to the old Buckner place, and he has seen many people buy and sell it. Apparently, people don't keep it for very long for some reason. Marty then makes a joke to the man who then calls Jules a whore, and this totally changes the vibe of this whole interaction, with both sides becoming a little hostile. They then finish filling up, Kurt throws the money at the man's feet, and they drive off towards the Buckner place. A little while later, down Tillerman Road, we see the RV drive through a tunnel located on the side of this big-ass mountain. And while we see this far back shot of this, there is this like falcon that's like following them. But as they enter the tunnel, the falcon slams into this invisible force field.
That shit threw me for a fucking loop.
Yeah.
The first time I seen it.
So what this tells us is the only way in and out of this force field is through this tunnel.
Through this falcon.
Through the falcon's dead body that's in a bunch of pieces now. So after the tunnel, they then drive down this dirt road through the woods, when suddenly they pull into this big clearing and see this old, kind of decrepit cabin, which looks straight out of an Evil Dead movie.
Awesome horror cabin.
Yeah,
This
it's on point.
This is what I had in my mind when I heard Cabin in the Woods.
Yep. So when they get all out, when they all get out of the RV and they look at it, everyone's kind of like creeped out except for Kurt. Kurt loves it. They then all head inside as they all pick their rooms. Holden discovers that his and Dana's rooms have a two-way mirror. And Holden is a gentleman, though, and he alerts Dana before she finishes removing her shirt to change.
He thinks about it, though.
He does. He thinks about it. I think most people would think about it.
Yeah, he definitely, that inner curiosity hit him for a second, and then he did the right thing.
Well, like everyone has the angel and the demon on their shoulder, and even though you are a pretty respectful person, there's always that temptation of like, which I don't know why she's like taking her shirt off in front of a mirror. She's only been in this place like 30 seconds at this point.
She gotta get naked.
Gotta change shirts. But yeah, this prompts everyone to take a look at this weird addition to this old cabin. Her and Holden then agree to switch rooms, and as Dana goes to cover up this really fucked up painting of a lamb being sacrificed, we see that Hadley and Sitterson are watching them on monitors back in their command center. So basically, Hadley and Sitterson have this whole place bugged. They have cameras all over the cabin so they can watch everything that goes down.
Bro, Holden started ripping those clothes off so fucking fast. He knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing.
Like, before she even had a chance to even walk in the room and cover the two-way mirror up, he's like, I'm gonna strip down naked real quick.
I gotta show her I'm cut. Yeah.
Gotta show her this bulge I got from watching her take her shirt off.
So, two things. One, the inside of this place is very similar to the Evil Dead. I mean, like the fireplace, the little latch in the floor, like it's very similar. Another really interesting thing is obviously the inside of the cabin is a set and the command center is a set. But what's really interesting is when they built these sets, so the first floor is the cabin and then the floor above the cabin is the command center.
Huh.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's how they filmed it. So every time you see scenes with the command center, just think the cabin is actually right below where they're filming.
That's weird because in the movie they're supposed to be below the cabin.
They are, yeah. It's very different in the movie, but I always think that like how they do sets like that is really interesting. And then like now, and ever since I've seen that, like all I can think of is like, wow, the fucking cabin set is literally right underneath their feet.
Man, one day I am going to buy a shitty rundown cabin like this. I got to. I just have to have an old Evil Dead cabin.
I'm sure interest rates will be really high on that too.
Not if you buy it in the middle of nowhere, like one of those towns that's like 4 hours away from anything. And they're like begging you to take land. Alaska will probably pay you to get a cabin like this.
There's a lot of cabins there. So while at the facility, we then see Wendy walk in and begin to brief Sitterson on the chemicals that they are using to affect some of our group's behavior, most notably Jules, who we find out has had her blonde hair dye chemically altered to decrease her intelligence and increase her sex drive. But before she can finish, they get interrupted by a call from the Harbinger, who is, of course, being all dramatic, speaking about this, like, ancient sacrifice stuff, but he quickly gets upset when he discovers that he's on speakerphone. Hadley lies to him and tells him that he isn't on speakerphone, and as he goes back to his over-the-top monologue, Wendy, Hadley, and Sitterson start to try to, like, hide their laughter, which tips off Mordecai again that he's still on speakerphone, which causes him to get pissed. And this part is fucking hilarious. You just gotta see it.
Yeah, one thing about this movie, as I think I talked about it last week, I'm not the biggest fan of horror comedies. I think this movie does it really good.
Yep.
There was one of the movies that they pulled that fine line off very well.
Yep. So later on, we see Hadley and Sitterson taking bets from all of their coworkers on something that hasn't been revealed to us yet. Apparently, from what we can tell, this is something that everybody from every department does every year. We then see Truman ask if the director knows about this, and Hadley explains that the director doesn't care as long as everything goes to plan. He also says that despite all of their efforts of getting them to the cabin, the group of young adults must make the choice in order for it to work. And of course, none of this makes any sense to us yet, but it will in time. So, back at the cabin, we see it is now night and the gang is just hanging out by the fireplace, playing some music, having some beers, and playing Truth or Dare. And after taking a hit of his joint, Marty then stands up and dares Jules to make out with that moose over there, which everyone looks and sees that it's actually a very obvious stuffed and mounted wolf on the wall.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse, that he dared her to make out with this piece of taxidermy on the wall, or that he doesn't know what the difference between a moose and a wolf
Yeah.
is. That's fucking
So
you gotta be so stoned out of your fucking mind to mistake this for a moose.
not even close.
Like, if he would have said, like, a dog or something,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that dog over there.
Two very different animals. So, despite this odd request, Jules agrees, takes a drink of her beer, walks over very sexy like, and has the most erotic makeout session with this dead wolf I have ever seen, which totally confused my brain because I was like, wow, that was hot and not hot at the same time.
It's fucking gross,
It
man.
was weird.
Like, you know, I gotta say, if I was Kurt, I would be so fucking disturbed that my girlfriend did this, and she's doing, like, the "let's turn everybody on" thing in the room.
Yeah, but we find
We
out why
do
they're not, though.
we do find out why, but apparently, I guess, like, Marty's the only one who could figure it out.
Yeah, so shout out to Anna Hutchinson who really killed that scene. She did an awesome job.
Yes, she did.
Also, the wolf had a removable tongue that David would remove after every take,
And put his own tongue in there.
and he would wash the tongue. And when he would put it back in for the next take, because for some reason they kept making her do it over and over again.
Oh, yeah, for some reason.
But yeah, he would wash it, he would put it back in, and then he would, like, to make it look older, he would dust it in, like, powdered sugar. That way, when she would go to, like, make out with it and stuff again, it didn't taste like silicone. So,
Sure, what a gentleman.
yeah. And needless to say, this leaves everyone stunned. So, next up is Dana. But before she can get her dare, the basement door loudly pops open, revealing a set of steps leading down into a black hole, which is very similar to Evil Dead. So they all head down there where they find all kinds of shit. It looks like fucking American pickers down there. And the whole time this is all going on, Kurt is becoming kind of an asshole jock. Very different from the version of him that we seen before. So anyway, there's all this like random junk down there, like an old piano, and there's like these seashells and a fortune telling game. Pretty much everything between the years of like 1930 to 1970. And they are all each like looking around and they start picking up things and like looking at it. And this is going to be very important. And everyone is fucking with shit except Marty, who is like, maybe we shouldn't be down here and we probably shouldn't be touching this shit. We then see Dana pick up an old diary that belonged to Patience Buckner from 1903. And as she is reading it, the suspenseful music gets louder and louder as we see Kurt, he's playing with like a puzzle, and Jules is about to put on this necklace that's like on this wedding dress, and even Marty is attempting to look at a film reel. And right before all of this happens, Dana interrupts everyone as she begins to read from the diary, which causes everyone to stop what they're doing, put their stuff down, and listen to what she is reading.
Came so close from getting another Hellraiser.
Yeah. So what she's reading here is it's pretty fucked up. And she's basically saying that her family likes to torture and murder people, even to the point where her brother gets hard on when he cuts people's skin. What they call it, a husband's bulge.
A husband's bulge.
And the problem is she's kind of the outcast because she doesn't really enjoy this stuff. Dana then stops, saying that there's like no more left to read because the rest of it is in Latin. And Marty is immediately like, whatever you do not read the Latin. But as soon as he says that, there is a whisper that says, read it, which is weird because Marty is like the only person that notices this weird whisper.
Yeah, I would be 100% down here poking around in all that shit if this happened in real life.
I agree.
But when she got to the Latin, I am superstitious enough to say, okay, that's enough. Let's put it down.
I agree.
We don't need to, nobody here understands Latin anyway. Just put it the fuck down.
Yep.
Just let's be done.
I would agree. I don't know if it's because we watch horror movies, but I would be like, let's not do the Latin stuff. Like, let's just put that away. So, despite Marty's pleas to not read the Latin, and after some encouragement from Kurt, who is now like a full-blown asshole, Dana reads the Latin. We then cut to outside where we see the zombified corpse of the Buckner family come crawling out of the ground. And with that, we then see Sitterson stand up in front of the screen and announce to all of his co-workers that they have a winner. And now I get to explain some of what is going on here. So down in the basement, each item kind of represents a monster. And the group is led down there where they unknowingly get to choose what comes after them to kill them. And what all of the workers bet on is what monster will get chosen. So all of the people who put their money on the Buckners win the pot, which I think is a genius part of this movie. So as the crowd of disappointed coworkers file out of the command center, Sitterson notices Hadley is pretty bummed out about the merman not getting picked, even though Kurt had the shell in his hand. Like, it was so close. Sitterson tries to boost his spirits by telling him that he should be thankful because they are terrifying and the cleanup is awful. And of course, this makes us all want to see this merman.
Yes.
I remember when I first watched
merman.
it, I was like, damn, man, like I wish we could have seen that. Apparently, it's really cool.
Specifically, what the merman does that makes it so fucking messy.
Exactly. So meanwhile, back at the cabin, we see Jules continue to get more and more hypersexual and Kurt becoming more of a jock asshole. And speaking of Kurt, he decides that he is horny and sick of hanging out with this lame group of friends. So he grabs Jules and he takes her outside to fuck in the woods. You have a bedroom. Why are you going out to the woods? I don't know.
And an RV.
And
if you
an
really
RV, yeah.
wanted to get away from the people,
Yeah.
go fuck. Just go to the RV.
I totally forgot about the RV, but yeah, they have multiple places with beds that is not in the woods, but they're going to go to the woods.
Nothing like catching some chiggers on your balls because you didn't want to go in the RV.
So after they leave, Marty brings up how weird everyone's acting, especially considering how Jules is pre-med and Kurt is a level-headed sociology major, and now they're both playing the part of asshole jock and dumb slutty blonde. He tries to bring this up to Dana, but she isn't seeing it, which causes Marty to wonder why everyone but him is acting different. Meanwhile, while out in the woods, Kurt is trying to get Jules to do sexy fun time, but at first she's apprehensive. That is, until Sitterson turns up the pheromone gas in that sector, which completely changes Jules' mind, causing her to start removing Kurt's clothes. So they then lay down on the ground as Jules removes her clothes and as Kurt lays on top of her, passionately kissing her, and we suddenly see one of the Buckners stab her through her hand with this old rusty knife. Kurt runs to her rescue, throwing one of the Buckners to the ground, when he then suddenly gets stabbed in the back of his shoulder by another member of the zombie family. We then see Daddy Buckner arrive as he stands there menacingly staring at Kurt while holding a bear trap on a chain thing. Kurt tries to run but gets blasted in the back with the trap, knocking him out. Jules then tries to run back towards the cabin when Daddy Buckner swings the bear trap at her, causing it to snap shut on her back. He then pulls her towards him where he holds her still by her head as the brother Buckner picks up Kurt and makes him watch, while two other members of the family pull out this long rusty saw and cut off Jules's head. Back at the command center, we then see Sitterson and Hadley sit quietly as they watch the monitors as Jules is finally murdered. Sitterson then interrupts the silence by saying, "This we offer in humility and fear for the blessed peace of your eternal slumber, as it ever was."
So two things here. So right before she gets killed, they show a quick feed of the Japanese video.
Yeah.
We see this a little bit later on, but this is like in the process of it, and it is what you think like the stereotypical Japanese horror, like
Yeah,
the long hair,
very The
freaky
Ring.
girl. Yes. Which I thought was really cool because in the movie it shows like these different cultures of horror and mythology is real. Like it is an actual thing based off of where people are. So whenever they're about to have sex, they control the temperature and then they increase the moonlighting. So we see that they have complete control over this environment. Like
Yeah.
they can control the temperature outside, the lighting outside, everything. And he makes a comment. He's like, as long as or we have to keep the customers satisfied. But they're like, I think she's like, is the sex really necessary?
Well, no, she's taking off her shirt, and Hadley and Sitterson
They're-
are like, "Oh
they-
yeah, here we go."
Yeah, and then she's kind of like, is this really necessary? And he said that they have to keep the customers happy. And I kind of had a light bulb. We are the customers.
Oh, good point.
In the sense of the movie, we're not. But the old gods that come out of the ground is a metaphor for us horror fans, and they literally create the lighting, the atmosphere, the sets, everything to give us the customers what we want.
That is
And they have
very deep, but very good.
Yes,
I never picked up on that.
they have every single horror movie that you could ever think of at their disposal. Very interesting.
I've seen this movie so many fucking times, and I have never, ever, ever put that together.
Yeah, it was just when he used the word customers, like it was a
Well,
light bulb.
well-
It was like that is us horror fans. We are the customers, and they control every aspect to give us what we want.
Yeah, because this is Truman that originally brings it up, because he's new. This is his first time being involved in this. And, they tell him, like, we're not the only people watching, which is true. We are watching.
Yeah.
Us are watching. Yeah, good point. So after Jules dies, we then see Hadley walk over to a lever, and he pulls it down, which causes all of these gears to start moving, which causes all of this blood to stream into this ancient-looking room with these carvings on the wall. And one of these carvings is of this, like, fun-loving dancing woman known as the whore, and it begins to fill with blood. So we are starting to see that this group is some kind of sacrifice to something. So back at the cabin, we see that while sitting in his room, Marty begins hearing the whisper voices again, which is totally freaking him out. He then decides, the voice tells him to go take a walk. And while he is on the way out, he finds Dana and Holden making out. Now, Dana kind of backs off from this, telling him that she's never had sex. But before she can even finish that sentence, she realizes that that's not true. So what we are seeing here is similar to what happened to Kurt and Jules, where Dana is slowly being turned into the virgin good girl character, even though we know that that's not true at all, because she was recently sleeping with her college professor.
Yeah, that's a big point at the beginning that
Yeah.
wasn't mentioned. Yeah, she is currently just got dumped by her college professor.
Yeah.
And she's like, hooking up is the last thing I'm thinking about. And I'm like, wow, well, that's some good morals for somebody who was just fucking their teacher.
Yeah. And she even, like, when she's saying it, she stops and thinks, like, why am I saying this? Because this is not true at all. So something is causing our characters here, who we mentioned, is totally not your typical horror characters. They're slowly being turned into that, and we don't know what's causing that yet, but we will find out.
And I think that ties it back into us being the customers. This whole metaphor is a metaphor for horror movie fans.
Yeah.
We expect these type of characters, and everybody in real life is always like, well, that's not the friends I know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have any friends like this. And it's kind of showing that these are just regular people and that they're turned into this. And even with the sex scene, it's like, well, is the sex scene necessary? That's what the horror fans want to see in a slasher, in a horror movie. We want some type of nudity, depending on the type of movie. And if we don't give it to the customers, what happens? The movie fails.
Yeah, and thinking of it that way, that is really going to be that's going to come into play again way later on. So while outside, Marty is taking a piss in front of the cabin, and we just barely see the zombie corpse of Patience Buckner walking up behind him.
Awesome cinematography, by the way, on that shot.
Which-
out of focus.
Which I will say, you don't. It's really hard to see the Buckners, but when you watch the special features, like the special effects stuff, they actually look phenomenal.
I thought they looked phenomenal in the movie.
They
I
do
thought,
look
like-
good, but they look even better under the light.
So when they crawl out of the ground, that scene's fucking super awesome. But there's a scene coming up here where she opens the door and you get a really good shot at the I don't know which one, I guess it's the dad.
It's the dad, yeah.
big motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
And goddamn, he is, if I seen him in real life, I would just be like, I would shoot myself. I'd be like, I'm not even gonna go through this.
So yeah, Patience Buckner, she's like creeping up behind him, and as she gets closer and closer, we see that Marty has no idea this is going on. But before she can attack, a frantic Kurt comes running out of the woods, telling Marty to run back to the cabin, and right as he passes Marty in a full sprint, he spots Patience Buckner, and he fucking clotheslines the shit out of her. Like, she literally does a fucking full in the air backflip. And when they filmed it, they really did that. Like, hooked her up to the lines, and he ran and he put his arm out like he clotheslined her, and they literally flung that fucking girl around, and then boom, right on the ground she went.
Yeah, once you're a zombie, your kid privileges
Is
are
over. Yeah.
Just knock her out of existence. Who cares if she's a kid?
So as they run back into the cabin, Marty gets a good first look at the creepy zombie, which freaks him out. And they run inside, slam the door, while Dana and Holden run over to a bloody Kurt and ask him where Jules is, to which he tells them that she's gone. So a freaked out Dana then goes to look for Jules, but when she opens the door, Daddy Buckner is standing there in the doorway holding something. Dana, who is shocked to see him, steps back from the door when he then tosses what he is holding over to Dana. And when she catches it, she realizes it's Jules' decapitated head. Which, by the way, this head looks really fucking good.
It does. The fucking head was done phenomenal. The fucking effects on the zombie was done phenomenal. It was one of my favorite scenes of the entire movie.
This is the same effects team that did one of your favorite movies, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yep. So they know how to do zombies.
Yeah, and apparently a whole lot of other horror characters, too.
Yeah. So Dana, of course, freaks out and throws the head across the living room, and everybody is shocked by this. But thankfully, Holden and Kurt snap out of it just in time to run and slam the door shut. So Kurt then says, "We got to go room to room and barricade the windows and doors. And whatever we do, we got to stay together." And right as he says this, we see Hadley in frustration say, "Fuck." So Sitterson then tells him to calm down as he pushes a button which releases a gas into the house. And right as Kurt and the gang walk through this gas, Kurt stops and he thinks for a moment. And then he turns to the group and he says, "Never mind, we should split up." This stuff is great because, you watch a lot of these movies and you're just like, oh, no one would split up when everyone's being killed. And this movie actually gives you a legitimate reason of why these things are happening the way they are.
Well, yeah, they address
Yeah.
the tropes and why, like, what is causing the tropes behind the scene.
Yeah. And one of the best parts is, like, everyone else, like, they agree with Kurt except Marty, who's like, "Are you fucking serious? Like, why the fuck would we do this?"
And I don't think they ever explain in the movie, like, why Marty has
They
that.
do. They do, actually.
Is it just because he was so high?
It was
He
so
just smoked so much weed?
it was whatever was in the weed that he was smoking was
Yeah.
causing him not to he was immune to this.
See, I thought I remember the first time I watching that them address basically blaming it on the weed.
Yeah, so the chem department, like, gets, after he, dies, the chem department gets a hold of his weed, and this is, like, later on in the movie, Wendy comes in and says the chem department analyzed his weed, and that's what was making him immune to what we were doing. But before they can debate this, Daddy Buckner starts breaking down the door. Kurt then yells for everyone to get into the rooms as he runs to the door, and as they all disperse into their own individual rooms, we see Hadley, who is now eating popcorn while watching this, give the order to lock them all in. Now, Marty is totally confused when his door slams and locks behind him, and while trying to close his window, he accidentally knocks over a lamp. And when he looks down, he finds a tiny microphone connected to a wire. And this is, like, kind of one of my favorite parts of the movie. So he pulls at this wire, and he pretty much realizes that his room is bugged. So someone has been listening in, and his eyes get, like, real wide as he backs into this window, like, totally stunned by what he has discovered. And after a brief moment of silence, he then says, "Oh my God, I'm on a reality TV show."
That is what I mean, where they do the comedy right. Like, it's not too much. It's not a comedy movie, but they balance it just right.
Well, yeah, because you got Hadley and Sitterson. They're sitting there watching this, and they're like, "Fuck, he just figured it out." And he goes a complete different direction. And what makes it even better is that is, like, so accurate. Most people, at least horror people, would think that because of that show. What was that? What was that show?
Scare Tactics?
Scare Tactics. You immediately would be like, dude, I am on a fucking TV show. I'm on, like, a
Who set me
YouTube.
up?
I'm on a YouTube prank channel. Like, obviously, like, there's no way that real zombies are, like, killing my friends. Like, there's no way. Yeah, I love it. It's so good. So right after this, he realizes that his parents are gonna see this when suddenly one of the Buckners breaks through the window and pulls him out, but not before he gets a chance to grab his trusty coffee mug bong. Marty then quickly jumps up, just narrowly missing getting stabbed with the knife. He then extends his bong and uses it as a weapon, hitting, Jediah Buckner in the face with it. But unfortunately, it doesn't do much damage. Marty then says, "Fuck this, I'm out," as he takes off running towards the woods, but he only makes it about 20 feet before catching a knife in the back, dropping him to the ground. Judah Buckner then walks over, grabs him by the leg, and drags him into the woods, where we then hear this gross stabbing sound, and we see a large thing of blood splatter shoot up. And with that, Hadley walks over, and he pulls the next lever, which drains the blood into the ancient room, filling the outline of the fun-loving fool carved into the wall. But for some reason, this one causes a bit of, like, an earthquake, prompting Sitterson and Hadley to proclaim that things are getting a bit rowdy downstairs. So next up, Dana gets attacked by one of the Buckners through her window, but Holden quickly breaks through the two-way mirror we seen earlier, helping Dana to escape into his room, where they discover that there is a hatch under his bed that leads to the basement. And before heading down, they yell for Kurt to meet them downstairs. And as they jump down into the hole, they discover that they are now standing in the Buckner's murder torture room from Patient's diary. So while looking for a secret door out, Daddy Buckner looks down into the trap door in the floor where he sees Holden walking around. He then throws his bear trap chain thing at him, latching onto Holden's back as he begins pulling him up. Dana then puts a tire iron through Buckner's eye, but that doesn't kill him, so she then grabs a knife and begins uncontrollably stabbing him until he is dead.
Bro, that motherfucker's ability to throw a chained bear trap
He's very
is
skillful.
It's great.
If there was an
And,
Olympic
like-
sport of that, he would do very well.
And remember, these aren't zombies. These are redneck zombies.
Redneck torture zombies.
So for redneck torture zombies, main weapon to be a bear trap on a chain is genius.
Yeah. So after successfully saving Holden, Kurt then bursts through the hidden door in the other side of the basement, telling them to come on. They then escape the cabin and run to the RV, where Kurt cranks it up and they quickly drive off back towards the tunnel. We then cut back over to the command center where we see Sitterson watching the Japan monitor. And remember, Japan has an undefeated record, but that record has just been broken as we see a bunch of little girls transform this scary looking ghost creature into this nice gentle frog. And this very much pisses Sitterson off because now it is all up to the USA to pull this off. We then see Wendy pop up on a monitor and she's like freaking out because every other country has failed and it is now up to them. And if they aren't successful, then humanity is doomed. But Sitterson quickly cuts her off as Hadley points out that the RV is heading towards the tunnel. And they realize that the tunnel was never blown up like it was supposed to be, effectively trapping the group inside. Sitterson then radios the demolition department where they inform him that they are having technical difficulties, prompting Sitterson to run down there himself in a panic. As the RV gets closer and closer to the end of the tunnel, we see Sitterson working on the wires that sends the signal to the explosives, and right before they finally escape, Sitterson sparks two wires together, causing the end of the tunnel to explode, prompting Kurt to slam on the brakes and begin to reverse while avoiding being crushed by the falling boulders.
And you said this man's not a scientist.
He is a bit of a scientist.
He has literally mastered, he's probably worked in every
department, yeah.
He's probably learned every little thing. That's how he's the manager. And yeah, he's on it, man.
He was on it. So after this, what's left of the group, which is Holden, Dana, and Kurt, they are dumbfounded by what just happened. And as they stand on the dirt road leading to the cabin, they can see the other side of the road, which is just like 50 feet away. Because the way this road is like curved and it's located on the side of a mountain, it's separated just by this very deep valley. That's it.
Could you imagine if you were on a trip to a cabin in the middle of the woods and zombies came and started killing your friends and you got into a car in your RV and you're taking off to escape and a fucking explosion happens? How confusing that would be. I mean, your mind's 100% on zombies. It's like, we got this zombie issue. Once we get in this vehicle, we're out of here. We're saved. And then an explosion.
I would have this kind of the similar attitude that Dana has, where everyone's else like, well, we'll just find a different way. And she's like, well, I'm sure like a flood will happen or like just something is going to stop us, because this would be the point where I would realize, okay, this isn't like just a coincidence. Like somebody's doing this to keep us here.
Yeah, but like, yeah, I feel like that would take so long to process in your brain. Like, I feel like you would immediately be like, okay, obviously something's going on here, but I don't know, man. I would just be like, we're fucked.
I'd be like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Satan has come to screw us. Like, there's no getting out of here.
Is this hell? Did we die in the RV on the way here? We're in hell?
I would probably like either this is a nightmare or I died.
Yeah, this would be. I mean, it would be hard for your brain to put together what. For one, you got zombies. Now you know, like, zombies are real. Okay, like that's mind blowing in itself. 2, you can't escape. Like, you can see the other side of the road, but there's a tunnel, but then the tunnel just happens to collapse right as you're about to exit it. Like, yeah,
And it
that's
doesn't
wild.
just fall, like, it's clearly an explosion.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, so now there's zombies and zombie explosives.
So after this, Kurt has an idea. So on the back of his RV is his dirt bike that he brought along. And he is pretty confident that he can jump this valley and land on the other side of the road where he can then go and get help. So after his big heroic speech he does, we see Kurt drive down the road so he can get as much speed as possible. And he guns it like pedal to the metal. And he hits the edge of this road perfectly. And he's got it, man. Like, he's just like gloriously flying through the air. And Dana and Holden, they're stoked because they can tell, like, he's got it. He's not going to have any problem here. When all of a sudden, Kurt just slams into that invisible wall we seen earlier and goes tumbling down into the dark, dark hole of this valley, completely leaving Dana and Holden in shock. Now, after the tunnel thing, and then this happened, I would be like, oh my God, what the fuck is going on? Like, what the fuck is that thing?
Yeah. Yeah, my brain would kind of collapse at this point. I love how he gives the speech before he takes off. Like, I'm going to make it no matter what. Like, I'm going to be back with help.
For Jules.
Yeah. For my dead girlfriend. And then literally fucking just eat shit and die immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
For the record, I don't think he was making the jump. You look at that gap. Even if he made the jump, he's going to be so fucked up when he lands on flat ground on the other side. He's done.
Yeah, I remember, like, when I seen this, though, that this kill shocked the shit out of me. Like, I was not expecting that because they do a really good job of showing you the force field in the beginning of the film, but by this point, you forgot about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was and then when because, like, as he's falling, his dead body's, like, hitting the force field, like, every, like,
Over
50
and over
feet.
again.
And it's so fucking far down there. It just keeps going and going. You'll never recover his fucking body.
He's never going to financially recover from this.
So yeah, with that, we see another lever pulled as the blood begins filling the athlete wall carving. So another one down. Dana and Holden, who are now the last two left, run and jump into the RV where Holden says that there has to be another road and they'll just drive until they find it. But unfortunately for him, this attempt will be short-lived as unknowingly to them, one of the Buckners is hiding in the van. And he stabs Holden through the neck from behind, killing him instantly. This was the kill that was in Friday the 13th. It is the one, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but I think it was the one where,
Part 6?
I think it's part 6. There's an RV, and that guy's, like, driving, like, jamming to, like, Van Halen, and Jason, like, kills his girlfriend in the back of the RV, and then comes up and, like, kills him while he's driving, and the RV flips, and we see Jason, like, standing on the wrecked RV.
What are you back there, taking a dump?
Yeah, it's that. I'm pretty sure it's part 6.
It is.
Yeah, but when I seen this, I was like, oh, that's totally a Friday the 13th kill. Yeah, definitely. And I love part 6. It's such a fun movie. He called his girlfriend out for taking a shit.
What are you doing back there? Taking a fucking dump?
Oh, them damn enchiladas. Now, because Holden was driving, when he dies, it causes the RV to wreck and go slamming into the lake. Now, thankfully, Dana is able to survive and swim up to the surface. But when she is doing that, we cut back over to the command center where we see the celebration begin. And this is confusing to the new guy Truman because Dana isn't dead yet. And they explain to him that the Virgin, aka Dana, her death is optional, just as long as it is last and she suffers throughout the whole process. Hadley then starts to admit that he was kind of pulling for Dana the whole time, but before things get too sentimental, he gets interrupted by his own excitement of someone carrying a bottle of tequila. Because the party is about to begin here.
And once again, us as horror fans, the final girl can die or she can live.
It is optional.
Yep, it is optional.
So Dana then finally makes it to the dock, but success is short-lived as she immediately begins getting murdered by Daddy Buckner. And as we see this play out on the monitor, we see the control room full of workers who are now partying their ass off. Sitterson then starts giving the demolition department shit over the whole tunnel fiasco when they inform him that they didn't get the order to set off the explosives because of a reroute from upstairs. And this immediately puts Sitterson on alert.
He's like, I worked the reroute department. That's not right.
And just when he hears this news, he hears the red phone start to ring, which must be a big deal because it's a red phone. Like in every movie, like when the red phone rings, shit is real. Hadley then demands the music be turned off as they cautiously walk over to the phone and pick it up. And this is where they discover that someone besides Dana is still alive. We then jump back to Dana, who is getting her ass beat on that dock. And right as Daddy Buckner goes to finish her off, we see Marty and his bong of death show up to save the day.
I love that the whole time they're at this party, like talking on the monitor in the background, is her just getting fucking beat down on this dock.
She's getting fucked up. Like, yeah. And no one cares.
No.
No one gives a shit. They're stoked, like, because they have to do this once a year, and I'm sure this is like a really stressful thing that they have to deal with all year, getting this all ready, and it's finally over. They can breathe a sigh of relief for the next year. No one cares about her, what's about to happen to her. They don't care. So after knocking out Daddy Buckner from behind, Dana knocks him into the water by hitting him with a 2x4, and not wanting to waste their opportunity to escape, Dana and Marty take off into the woods. Marty then leads her to one of the Buckner's graves where once they climb inside, Marty shows her that he discovered an elevator that leads to an underground facility. And after realizing that there's no other way out, they decide to go down into the facility.
I gotta say, that creepy fucker that Marty knocked into the water, him slowly rising out of the water, was my favorite shot of the entire movie. Like, his creepy ass coming slowly out the water was just horror gold.
That stuff like reminds, like, it's even the bear trap stuff too, like when we just covered In a Violent Nature. Because he has it's not as cool, definitely not as cool, but remember, he kills the girl in the water, and then he does his slow, like, descent out of water.
Yeah,
it doesn't look as cool,
totally
but
like at the end of Freddy vs. Jason, when Jason's like slowly coming out the water. But this zombie dude is super fucking scary looking, and him fucking slowly rising out that water, I thought that shot was fantastic. Had to add that in there.
So the way this elevator that they get into is designed is 2 of the walls are like a stainless steel metal and the other 2 walls are glass. And there's a reason for this that we're about to see. Because right now, as they head down, it's just like, through the glass, it's just black. Like, you can't really see anything. So the elevator finally comes to a stop, and as Dana walks over to the glass, she kind of peers into this darkness when suddenly a full fucking grown werewolf attacks from the other side.
Hopefully grown. If this was an adolescent werewolf, I would not want to see a grown one.
But thankfully, this is really strong glass, so it doesn't break. The elevator then begins moving again, where we see a smoke monster appear on the other side of the glass wall. It then changes directions and moves again, and once it stops this time, both Dana and Marty are looking at two different things from two different sides.
This chick is very, very 13 Ghosts.
Oh,
Right
yeah,
here.
it is, yeah. Marty sees a little ballerina demon girl, and Dana sees a knockoff Pinhead who is holding the same little puzzle that we seen Kurt playing with earlier in the basement.
Yeah, so he is total Hellraiser,
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, they obviously couldn't use Hellraiser, but they even gave him a little, instead of a box, this is a
Yeah.
little fucking spear circle puzzle. But on the other side, that's Abigail.
Yeah.
They predicted the future
Yeah.
of horror. It's a little Abigail.
Pretty close. She's not a vampire, but it's pretty close.
She could be a vampire. We see like teeth in her face and shit.
Her
but
whole face is just teeth.
She's a little ballerina girl who viciously murders people.
This is true. So there's a couple things going on here. One, these are obviously prison cells that are being used to hold all of these monsters in, which we did hear briefly mentioned by Wendy earlier. Some of these are intentional ripoffs of other horror movie characters that we've seen before, like Pinhead. And they do this because, like, this whole movie is, like we said earlier, it pays homage to the horror genre as a whole. And finally, 3, this is where Dana puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that all of those items in the basement that they are fucking with were there so they would unknowingly choose who comes after them. Also, I don't know if you caught this, but when they do show like the knockoff Hellraiser, we get a kind of knockoff Hellraiser score, which is cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how they kind of, if you watch the basement scene really close and pay attention, like there's even, when we see all these monsters come out, there's even like stuff in the background that you wouldn't pay much attention to that is associated to one of these monsters.
Yep.
So I thought that was really cool how they did that. You think like, horror movie writers just ever have writer's block and just turn this movie on and pause it when all the monsters come out? They're like, okay, what kind of movie am I going to make?
I mean, it could. It has a lot of monsters.
That's how Abigail happened.
So as Dana realizes this, she then starts freaking out, like hitting the glass. And as the camera pans way back, we just see hundreds of creatures locked away in these glass boxes, which, if you got eagle eyes, you'll spot some fan favorites. There's a Pennywise, like a Pennywise clown. They have like the giant snake from Anaconda, and they even have like the 2 little girls from The Shining in one of the boxes.
Somewhere in there, there's ticks. There's killer ticks
hope.
in there.
So when you watch the special effects documentary, what they did was, because they built most of the special effects in California in their shop there, and then they had to ship everything to Canada. But when they got to Canada, they wanted some more stuff, but they didn't really have all of the stuff that they had in California. So what they did was they built one little square glass box, and basically while they were filming the rest of the movie, the effects team would build all of these fucking cool monsters. And they would literally, as soon as they got done with the monster, they would put it in the box, like have somebody, get in the costume. They'd put it in the box and they would film it. And they did this a bunch of times for all these shots. Like you see this pan back shot of all of these creatures. And it sucks because they're so small and you don't really get to see all the work that they put into it. But if you watch the special effects documentary, you see some fucking really cool shit that they made with very limited materials and time. It was amazing that they pulled it off.
I'm surprised they didn't have, and they may, if you pause it and look close, but I didn't see one, a knockoff Freddy. Considering Heather Langenkamp, her ties.
Yeah,
Special effects.
I did not see a knockoff Freddy in the documentary either. But yeah, if you want to see more of the really cool monsters, definitely watch that. So back in the control room, we see Sitterson and Hadley freaking out trying to track down Dana and Marty. Hadley then gets on the phone with the security team, informing them that they are somewhere in the facility and to make sure not to kill Dana first. Because remember, if the Virgin dies before any of the others, the whole thing is fucked. Thankfully, while Sitterson and Hadley are busy, Truman is watching the monitors and he sees which glass cube Dana and Marty are hiding in, to which Sitterson alerts security while pulling the cube from its holding area. We then see the glass cube open up as one security guard points a pistol at the two, demanding that only Dana come out. But before that happens, one of the zombie arms from the Buckners that Marty dismembered grabs the guard's leg, causing him to look down, giving Marty a chance to make his move. He then quickly jumps into action by slamming the guard into the wall and taking his gun and running off with Dana, making sure to thank that zombie arm on the way out.
Fucking zombie arms.
So they then walk into this room where there is like 5 elevators on each side and a control room at the end. And while looking around, they hear a woman's voice come on over the intercom, saying that they shouldn't be here and this should have went way differently. She then says that she understands that they're scared and confused, and they need to understand that what is happening to them is part of something way bigger and older than anything else that has existed. She then says that if they think all of the fucked up creatures that they have seen tonight is something, it doesn't compare to what came before and what lies below. She then explains that humans must please the ancient ones by sacrificing people, and unfortunately, Dana and her friends are the sacrifice. So after this, they hear the security team running up. So they run and hide in this control room where thankfully it is surrounded by bulletproof glass because all of these like SWAT looking dudes just start letting bullets fly. So much for not killing Dana.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems pretty reckless considering if you were to, there's a 50% chance if you hit one of them, it's going to be her and then the world's going to end.
Yeah. So after realizing that they are basically surrounded, Dana looks at the control panel and sees a big red button that says System Purge. Now, when you got crazy ass shit like this locked up, why would you ever design these cells to like open all at once? It seems like a terrible design
I
idea.
think it would be like the nuclear thing, like you would need a key and a code and all that shit.
Yeah. So Dana hits that shit, and everybody hears this loud beeping noise, which causes the SWAT team to stop and listen, when suddenly all of the elevator doors open at once, and tons of monsters come flying out, immediately attacking the SWAT team, and it's just like pure pandemonium.
It's so fast.
It's fast. So pretty much over the next like 10 minutes or so, all we see is just tons and tons of killers, monsters, and creatures of the night just being like released over and over again as they just ravage this whole facility, killing everyone in sight, even to the point where some of the workers are just killing themselves before. So, this was by far the most challenging part of filming. There were so many extras and so many practical effects. Like that shot of the elevator room, they used 270 gallons of blood and tons of fake body parts.
Yeah, so the initial elevator opening, of course, there's some CGI in there. It's super fast how quick they kill the SWAT guards, but when they show that room back and all that blood you're talking about splattered all over the walls, and there's just like 2 zombies chewing on some bodies there. There's fucking body parts everywhere. That was awesome.
Yeah, so and I'll get to the CGI in a minute because there's a reason for it. But originally, Drew Goddard wanted nothing but practical effects. This is why he hired like the best team, had tons of people, gave them tons of time. He had planned for it all to be special, all to be practical. And there's a lot of behind the scenes where he's in there helping design the sets and the practical effects. He's the one who put the blood himself all over the hair of the Jules head that we seen earlier in the movie. Like, he was literally in there with them doing it because he loves it. So, according to the special effects team, there was 170 people in monster costumes, even to the point where David Anderson's dad was helping do the makeup. There is this, like I said, a whole special effects documentary on this movie. I highly, highly, highly recommend you watch it because they ended up having to cut out. It looked to me like 80% of everything they did. There is so many amazing monsters, so many cool things that happen, so many effects that go down. Just they're talking about all the different kinds of blood they had to use. Like the Buckners had like the black blood, and then they had like just the regular red blood. There's even monsters where they were getting shot and there's like green blood flying everywhere. It's fucking crazy, man. And they said they really fucked up because on the page when they were writing the screenplay, all they wrote for this scene was like Pandemonium breaks loose. So no one really had any direction of what this was supposed to be. So they just kept adding more and more and more effects. It's fucking crazy, man.
Well, they pulled it off for having no direction.
So, like I said, there's just so much crazy shit. But we'll talk about the CGI. Now, we also see a lot of CGI stuff in these scenes. And this is because the set that they use. So the scenes in this building, this is a real building. This was one of the only sets they did not build. This is an actual like science building in Canada, and it was brand new. And they let them film in there at nighttime. And the problem they had was, despite all the people that they had, the building was so big that a lot of the shots still looked really empty. They just didn't have enough extras. So what they did was they ended up having to add those bigger monsters in with CGI to fill out the scene. Also, they had an issue where the special effects team, they literally, for one, they ran them into the fucking ground working them. Like, they worked them to death. That's literally, his dad came in and did special effects and he wasn't even getting paid. So there was that problem. But then the special effects team was also out of money. They were completely out of money by this point. So,
well, I give them a pass on like a giant anaconda. Like, there's only so much you can do to make a giant spider or a giant anaconda, something like that. Like, that stuff kind of needs to be CGI, because you can build a practical version of that, but it's not going to move with the same speed that it needs to in the movie.
yeah, it's just, man, it sucks because they put so much time and effort into it, and really a lot of that kind of silly looking stuff kind of takes over the scene.
Yeah.
And it is a bummer.
I agree.
So another thing that I really did enjoy with this scene too is we got to see a unicorn murder a man with its horn, and somewhere deep down in my soul, I think I needed that.
and now there's an A24 movie of a murderous unicorn.
Yeah.
So it's like they predicted the future.
So people just turned this movie on and was like, I got to come up with a movie idea. So over in the command center, the Truman's attempting to call for more security backup, but nobody seems to be responding. But they got that big ass steel door protecting them. Not for long though, because right after the emergency generators kick on, something real big starts trying to break down the door. And when it eventually breaks it, we see a bunch of creatures run in and immediately kill and rip apart Truman. Hadley then attempts to hold the creatures off with the machine gun, while Sitterson and Wendy tried to bypass the system for the escape hatch, when suddenly a bomb that Truman must have set goes off, sending Hadley flying across the command center. A very dazed Hadley tries to get back up. he then sees through all of the smoke and mayhem his favorite creature slowly crawling towards him. It's the motherfucking merman. We finally get to see the merman.
No, that's a great example of the comedy.
Yeah.
Great comedy put into this.
This thing is like, it's grotesque looking. It looks like a cross between like a shark and a man. And I totally love that they did it practical because it's so good.
It's a shark man fish whale.
And this is actually during test screenings, this is everyone's like voted favorite scene.
Well, we also get to see why
Yep.
there's such a mess.
So right when Hadley realizes that Merman's headed right for him, he's just like, oh, come on. Like, it's very ironic. The merman then climbs on top of him, biting his face as we then start to see Hadley's blood begin shooting out of his blowhole.
Yeah. Merman's got a blowhole.
If you do anything, you have got to watch the behind the scenes shot of this. It spews a massive amount of blood for 9 minutes straight. And they got this guy in this suit, and he's like smacking his tail the whole time he's doing this, and the puddle of blood gets so fucking big around him. It gets to the point where when the tail smacks, it's like huge splashes of blood.
It's a shame it happens so fast in the movie. We don't really get to see a whole lot of that.
So everyone was on set was like confused because it just kept going and going and going. And it finally starts to sputter, and you hear the director, Drew Goddard, go, "Is it finally out?" It's like, is it done? They cut so much of it out, but it is so fucking awesome.
Yeah, they went from 9 minutes to, I don't even think it lasts 9 seconds.
Yeah, it was very quick, but it was awesome. So Sitterton finally gets the escape hatch to open, and right as he goes to lift it up, a huge tentacle comes through the ceiling, grabbing Wendy and pulling her up, eating her. Sitterton says fuck this as he jumps down, closing the hatch behind him, and we see that he is now inside that ancient temple thing that we have caught glimpses of the whole movie. So he starts running down this hallway, and when he goes to cut around this corner, he runs right into Dana, who stabs him in the stomach with the Buckner's knife. As Sitterton kind of falls back into the wall on the verge of death, he grabs Dana's arms, he looks at her compassionately, and he tells her with his last bit of energy to please kill Marty. He then falls to the ground dead, and Dana kind of stands there staring at him, thinking about what he said.
Kind of fucked up how much thought she put into this.
Marty then pleads for her to come on, but he then realizes what she's thinking about, and he hands her the gun he stole from the guard, and he tells her that it will be easier with this. So they then run off, where they eventually find their way into that ancient room with those carved symbols that we've seen every time one of them died. And this is where they finally realize that they are the sacrifices to this thing.
Man, I don't think Marty discovered what she was thinking about. I think Marty gave her the gun because he thought she was so stunned because she just killed somebody with a knife.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's probably what that
she
was.
She just stabbed him in the stomach, and he thought she was kind of fucked up from it.
Yeah.
So he gives her the gun, like, kill him will be easier if you just shoot him. Because he doesn't realize, I don't think, until what we're about to get to, the standoff.
And while they're discussing the reason why this sacrifice has to happen, they get interrupted by the director, who is played by Ellen Ripley herself, Sigourney Weaver. So she then starts explaining the deal here, and the rules are different in every culture, hence why we've seen the little girls in Japan. And I think this plays back to what you were saying earlier, where horror is different in every culture. Like Japan does a lot of the kind of creepy ghost shit, especially creepy kids. We have a lot of different, here in the US, the big thing is like the teenagers, the jock, the slutty girl, the final girl. And I think that makes sense. And I'll tell you in a little bit what the other countries did. So it'll kind of play out even more there.
Yeah, there's even a part where they're all betting, and the security guy, he mentions, like, do they know about this upstairs? And he says, "Oh, the director doesn't care as long as everything goes over smooth."
Yeah.
I think that was another tip of the hat to, like, a director of a movie doesn't really care what goes on as long as everybody does their job and the movie's good and it's successful.
Another really interesting thing here is another person that they actually tried to get to play the director was Bruce Campbell.
Hmm.
He was busy. Yeah.
He was busy.
Yeah. But it would have been cool to have Bruce Campbell in this.
He was shining his chainsaw arm.
So despite these differences, there are a few things that must be the same. Those things are youth, so the sacrifices must be young, and there must always be at least 5. So Marty then asks what happens if they don't pull it off, and the director says that the ancient ones, the gods that used to rule the earth, will rise up and take the world back over, pretty much killing all of the humans and ending mankind as we know it. So Marty, just like he said in the RV at the beginning, says that maybe it's time for a change and society should crumble. The director responds with the fact that every human on Earth will die, including him and Dana, so they can die with everyone or for everyone. And unfortunately for mankind, this doesn't really change Marty's mind. But we do see Dana, who is standing behind him, raise the gun at Marty's back. So Marty turns around and is pretty let down when he sees this, and she's like, dude, it's the whole world. Which, in my opinion, I would have killed Marty. I 100% would have killed Marty.
No,
just
man,
me.
I don't know. I think it's kind of fucked up. Like, she would have died way sooner, and the world would have ended anyway had he not come back and saved her fucking ass.
Yeah, I wouldn't let my family, like, die for that, though. I'd be like, dude, unfortunately, we both got to go. So, or gave the gun to the director and let her kill Marty, but I wouldn't have let the world get destroyed.
Well, here's the chances are she's gonna die anyway. She has no way out of this place. Like, the virgin is could die or could not die. It's kind of the director's choice or the God's choice. So there's a good chance that even if she kills Marty and the gods are now satisfied, there's still all these things out on the loose and nobody to contain them. She's not getting out of this shit alive.
Yeah, that's my point, though, is I wouldn't be worried about me getting out of it. I just wouldn't want, like, my family and pretty much, like, all the innocent people in the world to die, even though I'm gonna die no matter which way this goes. Yeah, I wouldn't have let I would have let Marty die.
I would have been like, Marty, watch out behind you, and then shot him in the back. I wouldn't have let him see me kill him.
Oh, yeah. So right before, that's a good plan. So right before she shoots him, she apologizes. And this is when Marty sees the werewolf come sneaking up behind her. And he decides not to tell her, which causes her to get attacked and drop the gun. Marty and the director then fight over the gun before Marty punches her in the face. She goes flying and Marty takes aim and begins unloading rounds into the werewolf, effectively saving Dana. Marty and the director then start fighting over the gun again while a very injured Dana lays on the steps, bleeding out. She's fucked up.
She's had a rough night.
Yeah, that's an understatement. We then all of a sudden see Patience Buckner come walking into the room, heading straight for the two fighting over the gun. Now, Marty and the director, they're on the ground fighting, so they don't see this coming.
But Marty's getting his ass kicked by this old lady.
He is. Dana then yells for Marty, who looks back and sees Patience getting closer. He then lets the director flip him over to the ground and gets on top of him. And right as she goes to kill him, Patience puts her hatchet right in the back of her head, killing the director instantly. Marty then kicks the both of them off of the ledge where they fall into the deep pit where the old gods lay. We then start to see this big earthquake begin as Marty walks over and joins a dying Dana on the steps. She then apologizes for almost shooting him, where he then apologizes for letting her get attacked by a werewolf and ending the world. He then pulls out one last joint and lights it as they both forgive each other. They then decide to just let the world end as they hold hands, smoke this joint, and watch the ancient temple crumble around them. We then get a shot of the cabin in the woods one last time before a giant hand comes bursting through the ground, destroying the cabin as the screen goes black. And that is the end of Cabin in the Woods.
Awesome ending.
Yep.
Good shit.
All right, so I got some interesting facts here. During the lake scene, the only student not to jump into the lake is Marty, who remains fully clothed on the dock. And this was due to Frank Krantz noticeably being in better shape than the other male students. The writer said that he looked like a ripped Jesus. So they were like, dude, you got to play the stupid kind of stoner character. You can't take your shirt off and be like a GQ model. Like,
Oh.
yeah. Yes, they
Didn't
made
know
him keep
that.
his clothes on. Yeah, because apparently he's like really into physical fitness. So
Yeah, kind of hard to sell the stoner fucking hippie guy and be like super ripped.
yeah. So the failed rituals from other countries are references to various classic movies and monsters. The Japanese ritual is reference to The Ring. The Buenos Aires ritual is a reference to King Kong. The Stockholm ritual is reference to John Carpenter's The Thing. And the Madrid ritual appears to reference Dracula. So all kind of big movies that came out of those areas.
Good shit.
The camper that the characters drive in the cabin is a reference to The Hills Have Eyes, which
Huh.
is interesting.
I could see that with the gas station they stop at too.
So this one is super interesting. It is mentioned in the movie that the American facility has only failed to complete its ritual once before in 1998 due to a screw up by the chem department. This is a reference to the movie The Faculty. The 5 character types are portrayed as the jock, the scholar, which is Josh Hartnett, the whore, the fool, and the virgin, which is Elijah Wood, with them defeating the monster with a homemade narcotic, which is the chem department screw up. That's really interesting. So they wrote that in there specifically as a shout out to The Faculty. So this is what really happened in The Faculty.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. On the whiteboard in the control room, when the staff are taking bets on the victim's potential killers, both Deadites and Angry Molesting Tree are listed. These are obvious references to The Evil Dead from 1981 and its sequels, most of which also took place at a cabin in the woods.
Oh man, I didn't see the Angry Molesting Tree.
Yep, I've looked at, you can look up pictures of it, yeah.
I bet, so every time I've seen it, it's just second time watching it, but I've literally tried to read through as many as I could.
You can just
while it's
Google
up
it.
there.
People got pretty good pictures of it. All right, so ratings and kill count. Total kills was 6 billion.
6 billion. The whole world.
Yeah, I tried to look it up. It's way too many kills.
There was only 6 billion people in 2012.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
So I just did kind of our main character cast here. We have Jules, that was decapitated by the Buckners. Kurt, who slammed into a force field on a dirt bike. Holden, stabbed through the neck by the Buckners. Truman, who was eaten by zombies. Hadley, who was killed by Merman. Wendy, who was killed by the giant tentacle thing. Sitterson, who was stabbed by Dana. And Dana and Marty, who were killed by the giant evil God Hand. All right, so my favorite kill, hands down, Merman. Easily, that's easy. My second favorite kill of the movie was the unicorn.
The unicorn.
Yep, the unicorn.
So I tried to, because there's so many kills in this movie.
There's a lot.
I tried to make it just down to the main characters. So out of the main characters, the Merman kill is I mean, it's just it's really funny because of him mentioning it earlier in the movie. It's kind of like when he makes that comment and it's still smoky and you can't even see it, you know it's the merman.
Mm-hmm.
And the fucking blood out of the blowhole. That was just hilarious. And then my second, I went with Julie being beheaded, mainly due to the way her head looked when that
Yeah.
fucking giant ass motherfucking zombie threw it at Dana and she catches it. I was like, damn, that shit looks good.
It did look good. All right, so rating. I gave this movie a 4.8. I love everything about it except how the CGI that they had to put in overshadows a lot of this amazing special effects work. That's my only complaint. If that stuff wouldn't have been in there, I'd probably give this movie a 5. I think that this movie is hands down phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big fan.
Love this movie.
So I gave it a 4.2. I think it's an awesome blend of horror and comedy. Great way to show all these different horror tropes and horror characters in one movie. I give it a 10 out of 10 for originality on the story.
Yeah.
Like, there's no story even close in comparison. The feel of the cabin in the first half, awesome Evil Dead feel to the cabin. The characters were super awesome. The redneck fucking zombies were the best and scariest looking characters, I think, in the entire fucking movie. The tall one, like I said, was absolutely horrifying. Really cool cinematography shots, which I think is something that kind of gets looked over in this movie. You know, the shot where he's out there pissing and out of focus, you can see the zombies moving in the background, or the big one coming out of the water. Really, really, really cool setup shots. The idea that the gods are kind of a metaphor for us as horror fans. I didn't really pick up on that for the first time I watched this movie. Didn't really hit it. That didn't really hit me until some of the language that was used, and then it kind of felt really obvious, and then I kept picking up things throughout the movie. Kind of made it a cooler movie to me.
Yeah, I have to go back and rewatch it with that in mind because like I said, I've never picked up on that.
Yeah, I thought like, man, what a really cool way to do a like this ode to the horror genre and horror fans in general, and in an awesome story. Overall, super awesome mix of horror and comedy, super original story. I think it's a must watch if you're a horror fan.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great movie. We're very picky about our comedy and horror, but this movie knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would rate it higher if it was a pure horror movie. I love the comedy that they did put in there. I'm just like, this is probably closest to the highest rating that a comedy horror can get, in my opinion. The only thing, if I could pick anything negative about the movie, would be some of the CGI.
Yeah.
And it's not even that the CGI was done bad. It's just, I hate CGI.
Yeah,
That's
that was my knock on it is and they did so much cool practical effects, but I mean even me who's seen the movie many times didn't even know there was that much practical effects in it until I got to watch the behind the scenes and was like, "Holy shit." So then when you go back and you watch that whole scene with that in mind and you actually look in the background and see how much cool shit is happening. But the problem is the CGI stuff takes your focus off of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't give it a 5. Like,
Well, that's why I didn't, in my rating, I didn't initially knock it for CGI, was because of the amount of practical effects that they did use. And I mean, there's hundreds of characters, horror characters in this movie. So they used 10 times more practical effects than most movies used. To do everything in practical effects would have been nearly impossible. So I didn't knock them for that, but if I had to choose something, it would be the CGI.
well, that is our take on The Cabin in the Woods. I'm glad we finally got to talk about it. Once again, we thank you guys for listening. Please give us a follow or like if you enjoyed the show. Check out the website, check out the socials. Tell a friend, a family member, or your favorite human sacrifice about the show. And we hope to see you next time.